Paul Vienneau never set out to become an agent of change.
He's made such a difference to so many people and really, I think, changed the perception of a lot of us in the disability community in Halifax.
Paul is every man's sort of advocate for accessibility, right? He communicates so well with the average person on the street.
From his injury,
there was not too much hope that he would survive because he was in really bad shape.
Through his ongoing recovery.
What do we value as a society? Is it lip service, or is this actually about including people for real?
And to finding a new calling.
I see that there's a place in the city for me specifically to do the work that I do.
Paul Vienneau has been on a path to become the accidental activist. It's November 6th, 2018.
Today is my 50th birthday.
He's celebrating with friends at a local bar.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to you.
That's right, everyone.
Happy birthday.
It's a birthday Paul never thought he would see.
So when I was 22, I lived in Toronto and I had this severe injury. So my sort of life expectancy was early, mid-30s. All these things that I've sort of proved them wrong. This one about how long I could expect to live, I couldn't really shake that one off. This sort of, I call the fear, capital F, the fear, which is death. The fear sort of never went away. Cheers to the Queen. The way that I've been looking at this year, it's like this transitional sort of year where I need to get some stuff done.
Growing up in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, music was at the center of Paul's life. Paul's mother, Myrna Vienneau.
His father, Charlie, played in bands for years, and so Paul would be around them all the time, where they had their gear all set up in the basement. Paul would go down and listen to them, and he always did it from a young age. Paul has a brother, Kevin, who's 3.5 years older than him. They played from the time they were just really young.
I got my first drum kit in grade 3, so 1975 or 76. Played my first band was my brother and I. My brother played guitar, and Louis Robichaud sang, and we were called Louis J and the J Notes, and we played in the basement of our house. When I was 12, I got my first bass guitar, borrowed from my Uncle Walter. Almost my entire life, it was just this foregone conclusion that I was here to play music. It always felt like the only thing I was talented at or I had any affinity for.
At the age of 21, Paul followed his dream of becoming a professional musician to Toronto. Former bandmate and friend Peter Bayless recalls Paul's talent.
In the music world, we call big ears. Big ears means you can just pick anything up and emulate it or play it well. When you hear Paul play bass and play music, your life is going to change a little bit. There's no question about that. He's that good.
Paul slipped easily into the Queen Street music scene of the early 90s.
My band was rehearsing every week. I worked in a bar as a busboy. Saw a lot of good music. First time in my life, I felt myself, like I was on the way to being an adult, which is what I'd always wanted as a kid, was to go out and find my life. So my life was the best it's ever been.
We were writing songs. We had a month of Wednesdays all booked up at a club in Toronto. You know, representation, publicists there, people, record companies were going to come out.
But then, on the night of August 12th, 1991, everything changed.
We had gone out to see a very good friend of ours playing at a club in Yorkville.
At the end of the night, Paul and his brother Kevin headed home on their bicycles.
I decided what I wanted to do was to go to my brother's place and pet his cat. So I had just passed my brother, and I could see the green light. So, you know, that's where I'm going. Tractor trailer blew by me to try to make the turn before I did. He cut the wheel really sharp, so the trailer sailed in like a missile. It was like the cosmic light switch that is the universe was flipped off. And I didn't exist for 1 million years. I came to on the ground, on my back, and my legs and my bike were sort of pretzeled in my peripheral vision. I'm under the Gardiner Expressway, so I told my brother that I loved him. I remember him kind of going like, oh my God, get the truck off him.
Paul was rushed to hospital.
He got that call in the middle of the night that nobody ever wants. There was not too much hope that he would survive because he was in really bad shape. It was like being in a nightmare.
Read his last rites 4 times. Seeing him was very, very shocking for anybody that's not used to that. When they say, you know, wires and the tubes and everything. You know, you knew when you saw it for the first time that this was going to be a long journey of recovery.
Right from the beginning, he was in a lot of pain because, well, just his injuries. He had, you know, so many things wrong. It's hard to watch your kid suffer like that, and he suffered like, you know, no one would ever know unless you were there. He suffered a lot. He went through hell.
My colon was ripped open like a wet paper bag. My urethra was snapped like a rubber band. Down at the bottom of my spine where my sacrum is, your pelvis comes off like wings. My wings were snapped off. Kidneys had failed. My right lung collapsed, so I had a chest tube. I remember telling my family that they were gonna have to take my leg. But instead of just losing my leg or just breaking my back, as they amputated up like foot to knee to hip, they continued up on my back.
He spent 1 full year in acute care in hospital and another year in a spinal cord rehab center. When he was discharged, Paul set out to pick up where he left off.
This is my purpose in the universe, is to play music, no matter what, despite, you know, horrible injury and a lot of trauma, I'm still able to play music. So I booked a friggin' tour down to the East Coast with the Hopping Penguins that I had joined because my brother was in that band.
But touring in his wheelchair came with challenges.
I remember so many times pulling up to venues, being lifted up all these steps, and then getting on the stage was like 2 guys in back, 2 guys in front, just lifting me up like a fridge, kind of. So many venues, so many stages where it was what I did to play music, lifted in and out.
So it was a learning curve for us, as well as for him. So some of the challenges was, you know, in and out of the vehicle, to and from the gig. In a club, the majority of them are not accessible. Plus, for him, it's embarrassment. He's dealing with people staring at him. He started by turning his back to the audience quite a bit, because he fought with that. And we respected that. We would never turn to him and go, no, turn around. But no, we're glad you're playing. That's like you're holding it all together for us, so we need you there.
Then, in 2004, some people who were lifting him into a club in Halifax accidentally dropped him while he was seated in his wheelchair.
So the guy in front basically pulled my chair out like a magic trick. And I went down on the edge of a concrete step where I have no glutes to pad, and I thought that I shattered my pelvis.
Paul decided that his life as a professional musician was over.
I just got tired of the indignity of being lifted onto things. For self-preservation, I just had to do this thing, which was to not define myself as this thing I defined myself for my whole life.
He took up professional photography and tried to move on.
The Ice Age cometh in Nova Scotia. In Halifax, people are beginning to forget what concrete sidewalks look like at some bus stops, street corners, and entrances to businesses. So they're taking matters into their own hands.
Everybody's working hard. I just believe that they don't have a plan for curb cuts and for crosswalks.
Now,
In winter of 2015, Paul made national news when he took to the street with a shovel to clear icy sidewalks.
Originally, I just wanted, I'm an adult, I want to go pay my phone bill in person across the street.
But icy buildup on the sidewalks made maneuvering in his wheelchair tricky, and at times even forced him into traffic.
I get increasingly frustrated just calling 311 to get the city to do a finer job on like street corners and curb cuts.
So here's the broken ice and shoveling broken ice from a wheelchair.
It had been 2 months and a little bit since I'd been able to work. So I borrowed a metal aluminum shovel from my building maintenance guy and a metal rod of some soft metal, and I spent 6.5 hours smashing ice to clear this crosswalk.
Paul went at it for weeks, at dozens of different locations downtown.
I wasn't trying to make the system or the city or the mayor feel bad for what I was doing. I was trying to show them that there was a problem. I was shining a light on a deficiency in the system.
He called himself the asshole with a shovel.
I didn't want the workers to think that I was calling them out. So it's almost, if I call myself asshole, they're not going to call me asshole, kind of thing. And it's kind of catchy.
Friend and executive director of the Nova Scotia Accessibility Directorate, Jerry Post.
I was brought up in a very formal sort of family setting, so I even have difficulty time using it. So I started calling him the mayor of Spring Garden Road. He says, no, Jerry, I'm the asshole with the shovel, right? There's no, excuse the language, no bullshit with Paul, right? And so a lot of that clutter goes away and it gets right down to the core of what the issues are, and as well with practical solutions to make things happen.
Paul's notoriety caught the eye of other disability activists.
When I started shoveling, there were all these other things happening at the same time. The government was beginning to talk about a rights bill for people with disabilities, Bill 59. So I was invited to be a part of this group, and it was amazing.
I got to meet Paul as part of the whole Bill 59 Accessibility Act community alliance that we set up, so he was involved in that. And then we jointly made a presentation to the legislature.
20% of our population has a disability. It's projected to increase to about 30% by 2026.
It's not just, this is a lot of work for a few people. Like, this will benefit everybody in society. And also, it's the right thing to do. What do we value as a society? Is it lip service, or is this actually about including people for real?
Just having him there, right, to make sure that, that this bill spoke to the average resident and citizen out there was critical. So he put sort of a citizen's lens on it.
Getting involved meant Paul had to meet some fears head on.
I get stared at all the time, and at times it makes me pretty uncomfortable and want to hide. So the answer has become just push through it and get out there, because the people who are looking at me like I'm a weirdo, they're not my audience.
Over the years, Paul's fight for accessibility has resulted in significant gains for the city. From making the Halifax Jazz Festival more accessible to getting a better tie-down system for wheelchairs on city buses.
Because of his approach, is approaching people and, having a discussion with them and basically letting people see of what the challenge is of being, disabled, right? And the barriers. He's got a sort of a magical touch in making those sorts of things happen.
In 2018, he was a James McGregor Stewart Award recipient for his activism.
Paul is sort of every man's sort of advocate for accessibility, right? He communicates so well with the average person on the street, and when he gets down to sort of the core of what it's all about.
Hey, Matthew.
He's just an incredible person and advocate for everybody, and not just persons with disabilities. It's mostly for the disadvantaged in the community.
It's late November 2018. Paul is hosting a talk on how to make arts festivals more accessible, but he's running late.
I made arrangements to get a cab here. Waited down in my lobby for about 45 minutes. Got a call at 5:31. This thing starts at 6 supposedly, here tonight. That the driver had clocked off. So on his screen it said, you're needed by a wheelchair user for a ride, and he went home instead. It wasn't even that long of a ride. It's a hell of a long push, and it's cold, and I have bronchitis. And anyway, I took a bus and got off a couple blocks away from here, came down a sidewalk that's destroyed on Dalhousie's campus. They have these beautiful modern buildings, and the sidewalks are just crappy. They have bike lanes, which are great, because my injury was on a bike. I love cycling still, but they don't have any good accessible corners. So I've been up here in a while. So it just sort of reinforces that there's a lot of work to be done even and especially in places where people think they're more enlightened and open, because, you know, general rights activists have a big blind spot for disability. It's not a sexy issue. We're still treated like children, even by other activists, it feels like. So, as always, I'm the eternal optimist, but a little frustrated with how I had to get here tonight.
Paul puts his frustrations aside and gives his talk.
I toured out of Toronto for probably 12 years, flying across the country, played in Iqaluit, down into the States a couple of times. I don't think there was a ramp on any stage at any point.
The small audience doesn't dampen his enthusiasm.
Just like talking with real people. I think that's a way to really reach people, where you can look them in the eye and they can look you in the eye. And I think things sink in a lot better that way.
The talk ends, and the evening's sponsor, the Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival, presents Paul with an award.
I mean, we don't do this, obviously, for awards, but it's acknowledgement is encouragement, and being recognized, like, that's like fuel for the engine to keep doing stuff.
Paul pushes himself hard.
Turning 50 in an able body, you deal with a lot of issues anyway. So to deal with a body where I'm physically missing a lot of my back muscles, you know, it kind of makes them even worse. I've got sort of nagging injuries that are getting a little worse. I spent this winter with, I had a back spasm in November. I spent a month in bed. I had bronchitis twice. I had the flu twice. Most of my winter was taken up by bed rest and feeling like garbage. My instinct when I'm depressed is to kind of isolate and spend time alone.
Paul's friend April Hubbard, who uses a wheelchair, sees the toll his advocacy work takes.
We've had some amazing conversations where we've really been able to open up and talk about how you deal with building a life when you don't know what it's going to be like day to day and moment to moment, and the pain levels are going to change. And that makes what he's doing even more impressive in my mind, because he is putting so much effort out, often to the detriment of his own body, to help other people. And he's really sacrificing himself to do that.
It's late January at the Bus Stop Theatre. Paul is feeling better and is keeping his 50th birthday promise to do more this year. He's working the pre-show crowd at a special event he conceived called DisX.
It's sort of a takeoff on the TEDx Talks, except it's all people with disabilities. And it's designed to be, I don't want to say like an antidote, but social media and the media love these two views of disabled people, which is either we're doing these super heroic feats like Rick Hansen, or we're poor crippled bastards who are being saved by able-bodied people out in the public. My expectation for this, it was supposed to never be about inspiration porn, but I know people are going to be inspired by hearing the stories, and they're going to be educated. I'm really excited.
There's a door prize ticket for you. Thank you.
April co-produced the sold-out event.
He really has a way of inspiring people to do more than they thought they could, and be involved more than they thought they could, and build a community. And that's what I love about Paul.
Holy shit, it's sold out. And I can see that my mom's applauding, so I have free reign to curse all night. Yay! Just kidding. I felt it was really important to have visibly disabled staff working. Some of the things that we have that we felt were important are having sign language interpreters, and also having the CART system, which is like a remote translation service. If you want to bring in an audience, you have to bring in the whole audience. So that's what we're doing.
Good evening, everyone.
Among the speakers are Eric Payne, former member of the Canadian Armed Forces and an above-knee amputee.
So I'm now disabled. I'm a civilian. And how am I going to navigate all this? I'm going to need some fancy footwork.
And Vanessa Furlong, who gives a moving account of living with depression and anxiety.
I was 7, and I had 0 reasons to be sad, and I was so deeply sad.
The evening ends and the audience buzz is positive.
Yeah, the event was amazing.
I came, I think, to educate myself more, because being an able-bodied person, you take these things for granted.
There was a feeling in the room that night that every person I spoke to just felt there was a magic and something really unique that we hadn't felt at other disability events before. We felt closer together after we had shared our stories.
We all have something in common, and that was, to me, the beauty of DisX. It's not only the different communities under the umbrella of disability, you know, the able-bodied people that were there to support DisX, to say, yeah, we're just human, that's all it is.
I think tonight was a pretty much smashing success.
It's spring in Halifax. Up until now, all of Paul's advocacy work has been offered on a volunteer basis. But he's just been hired by the city as a contract consultant.
They need someone, they need one of us in there that's not of them. So it won't be like, you know, our boy kind of thing. But it won't be antagonistic because I don't work that way. They've advised transit on a bunch of things. Public works, snow clearance. I would like to make that more of a sort of formal thing.
Jerry Post understands Paul's drive for advocacy work.
In part why I do all the advocacy work is that, you know, in fact, Paul and I, we give a presentation now at Dalhousie School of Physiotherapy, and we call it Advocacy as Therapy, right? So I think that's part of it, you know, that it's really helping us ourselves and in terms of our self-worth within community to be able to contribute.
Another motivation is to give his work legitimacy.
As a musician, I will play free gigs, like charity gigs, but you know, your work has a value. I was happy to do this as I was doing without getting paid, because I get speaking gigs out of it that pay. To get deeper into the system and to make more permanent changes, it started to make sense to me that I should turn pro, let's say.
Today, Paul is meeting with his boss, Halifax's Chief Administrative Officer, Jacques Dubé.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Hey, Jacques, how are you?
Great, good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, how's the work going?
It's good.
Yeah.
We did a community engagement, my first time representing the city at the Accessible Parking Town Hall.
For him, as it is for me, you know, the positions that we have, they're not jobs, right? It's basically missionary work. And I think that's one of the reasons why they hired Paul, is for him to be that missionary inside of the organization to affect change and to be outspoken and at times critical of government when they're not acting on things that are reasonable to implement.
At City Hall, there's been a real change in the way that they think about people with disabilities. They're using us to get good information, whereas before they would just do everything for us.
Part of Paul's job requires working with city councillors like Lindell Smith.
So tell me what you got going on.
So I was working with, I met with the Spring Garden Road Business Association, Quinpool Road Business Association, about proactively making the business districts more accessible as a way to sort of get people to come in. This is an opportunity for me to contribute to like real policy that's going to be enduring.
Paul's mother, Myrna.
When Paul was in that hospital and so sick, and I never expected to see him where he is today. The work that Paul's doing now with his advocacy, Charlie and I, very proud of him.
April has noticed changes in Paul since he turned 50.
He seems more excited about the future and more willing to plan. He's made such a difference to so many people and really, I think, changed the perception of a lot of us in the disability community in Halifax.
All I'm doing is what people since the beginning of time have done, which is weren't happy with their surroundings and decided to get involved in trying to change it for themselves and for other people. And being a musician my whole life was awesome, but I never really felt like I've affected anyone's life in a meaningful way. I feel like now I have this great opportunity that I don't want to squander to help make our city better and to change people. And not everybody gets that kind of opportunity. So I don't take it for granted for a split second, but I'm super grateful for it.
Reporter Laura Bain, producer Wendy Purvis, videographer Andrew Pickup, additional camera Greg Valentine, audio operator Dave McGregor, editor Andrew Pickup, additional editing Hannah Giffen, media accessibility specialist M. Williams, audio post Mark Phoenix, graphics Mike Smith, senior producer Michelle Dudas, president and CEO David Arrington, copyright 2019 Accessible Media Inc.